parte, porque nosotros no solamente tenemos una actividad social en el puerto, nosotros tenemos hijos, tenemos familias que tienen otras profesiones, pueden ser guías de jardín o profesoras, o pueden ocupar diferentes labores. En el ejemplo de las elecciones nos va a tocar a todos por igual, así que nosotros como portuarios pensamos que es muy importante estar unidos, es muy importante ser solidarios, y estoy seguro de que cuando necesitemos una ayuda internacional, los compañeros del extranjero van a saber cómo responder, así como nosotros también hemos respondido a los llamados de solidaridad internacional que se dan en el entorno del Consejo Internacional de Ciudadanos.
Sí, mencionaste el nombre de Tim Riley y ¿qué más? ¿Mark qué?
Mark Bat.
¿Bat?
Bat.
Mark Bat. Tim Riley? Ken Riley, yeah, perdón. Sí. And so, what I wanted to mention to our comrade Clarence, ILA, correct, yeah. Charleston, exactly. Yeah. Look, what I want to mention to Clarence Thomas, our compañero Clarence, is that the International Dock Workers Council, we met also with Tim Riley, Ken Riley and Mark Bat, who have been, who also, we wanted to mention that in Lisboa, we met, our representative there met with the longshoremen who have stated that they have all of them on the worldwide level have their eye on Chile and are looking very closely at Chile. And they are hoping that they're going to be able to hold on a second.
El comité decía que nosotros estamos, sabemos de nuestra posición estratégica dentro de la economía y vamos a ser solidarios hasta la última consecuencia
Okay.
por nuestro tema.
Okay. So we know that we are all very aware of the strategic importance of the role of the work of the dock workers and of the longshoremen, and so we are going to be working together, hoping to work together so that we can, and we're going to be assuming a very leadership role in terms of making sure that our demands are met, the demands of the people are met. Many of our members have suffered at the hands of repression as well. Some of our members have lost their eyes. There's been a case of one of our members getting 22 pellets in his body. But we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to fight because that is the nature of who we are. We are fighters, and our families. We're not only port workers. We're also families. We have our families who are teachers. We have family members who are involved in education. We need to go to good schools. We're also fighting for making sure that for pensions, and so we need to make sure we keep unified, all of us on the international level, and have solidarity. And so when we hope that in the future, when we make a call out for international solidarity among all of us, we can all fight together and work together to fight this privatization and fight together. Sí, mira, Nelson, lo que quiero decirte, primero te quiero dar, Clarence quería contestarte ahí mismo en este momento, ¿ok? Que te quiere responder, ¿ok? Entonces ahora mismo Clarence va a decir algo. You want to say something now?
Yes.
Okay.
If the working class is united, it is impossible to fail.
Si la clase trabajadora está unificada, es imposible fallar. Eso es lo que está diciendo Clarence. Y luego él va a hablar también. In a little while you're going to be speaking as well, right? Yeah. Okay. Eso es lo que él quiere decir. Pero espera un segundito.
And also, I would like to thank him for being at the IDC conference at this very important moment in history and expressing international solidarity.
He wasn't, I don't think he was at IBC. No.
His union was from Chile. His union was.
Yes, his union. Entonces, quería agradecerlos a ustedes y tener un representante de la conferencia de internacional de trabajadores portuarios de IDC en Lisboa y de expresar esa solidaridad internacional.
Ya, muy bien. No voy a decir, compañeros que están Alejandro, y estuvieron allá, no han contado, no es presente en el consejo, está muy preocupado de los siguientes.
Perdón, ¿nos has contado qué?
No han contado de que la reflexión en el encuentro de parte de los trabajadores portuarios fue muy solidaria, estuvieron demostraron mucha preocupación por la situación que se vive.
So yes, our representatives Cesar and Alejandro, who were there, told us that the way that they were received by the dock workers and longshoremen there was very warm. Everybody there was very worried about the situation happening with the dock workers in Chile. They were very concerned.
An injury to one is an injury to all.
Como dice el refrán, una lesión a uno es una lesión a todos nosotros.
Sí, bueno, esperamos poder ganar. Tenemos toda la convicción de poder, por lo menos, conseguir una reforma a las elecciones, por lo menos conseguir campos de gratis o subvencionados de equidad. Bueno, para qué decir, en educación, algunas metas como trabajadores la estamos poniendo como transables y sabemos que con la ayuda de toda la ciudadanía la estamos a lograr.
Yes, so there's certain objectives that we're placing that are not negotiable, and many of them have to do with our pension system and also our education. What our demands have to do with our education. So we hope to be able to win. We have to be willing to fight for it, and we'll continue to do so. Yeah. Lo que sí quería hacer era, no sé si tú tenías algo más que decir o querías recibir algunas preguntas de las personas que están aquí. ¿Estás abierto a preguntas?
Sí, me gustaría estar para
Okay, yeah, perfecto. Anybody have any questions regarding any that they'd like to make?
What do they want in support of U.S. workers in solidarity?
Okay. El Steve tiene una pregunta. ¿Qué es lo que están pidiendo ustedes como sindicato de parte de los trabajadores de Estados Unidos como para solidaridad? ¿Qué es lo que están pidiendo ustedes?
El llamado no es solamente a los compañeros de Estados Unidos, sino que a través del Consejo Internacional lo que hemos pedido es que se produzca un boicot a las cargas que están saliendo desde Chile.
So the
Lo estamos viendo con compañeros que están en Hong Kong, lo estamos viendo con compañeros que están en Europa, en España, lo estamos viendo con compañeros de Estados Unidos, con compañeros de las lunas que están llevando algunas acciones. En el marco de la solidaridad que pueda ser posible, cualquier gesto va a ser bienvenido.
And so we're not only asking it of the workers in the United States. In fact, through the International Council, we're asking that there be a boycott of Chilean goods in the ports. And we're working with the workers out of Hong Kong as well as those from Europe, specifically Spain. And the United States, our comrade Cesar Luna is doing is trying to organize that. And in terms of solidarity in general, any kind of support would be very welcome. Any kind of support from the solidarity perspective would be very welcome.
Actualmente el coordinador de TSE tiene la estadística en todos los datos, nombres de los públicos que han salido durante esta discusión. Tenemos la esperanza que en alguno de los puestos pueda hacer un bloqueo o alguna acción de solidaridad para presionar al poder ejecutivo del gobierno y que realmente los motivadores no estamos encabezando las revoluciones, la demostración de solidaridad con el pueblo, de la pena través del mundo. Somos todos uno solo.
So right now, the coordinator of the IBC has a lot of stats and names of these ships, the ones who are bringing these these cargo. And so we're hoping that we can organize some blockades and some solidarity actions in order to be able to pressure the executive branch of our government and to let him know that it's not only the longshoremen and the dock workers of Chile that he has to deal with, but rather on an international level, that we are all over the world.
Ahora va a decir algo Clarence.
Yes, I am retired from ILW Local 10. However, Local 10 has taken solidarity action to boycott Chilean cargo in the past. And that was initially done in 1973 and also in 1978. I can't speak for what they're going to do in the immediate future, but it is important to know that we do have a history of standing in solidarity with Chilean people.
Yo quiero enfatizar de que yo soy jubilado, dirigente jubilado de los activadores internacionales, de trabajadores activadores internacionales, ILWU Local 10, pero quiero recalcar que el Local 10 ha tomado una postura así, ha hecho boicot, ha participado activamente en boicot en contra de los buques chilenos durante la época de la dictadura. Primero fue en el 73 y la siguiente vez fue en el 78. No puedo yo decir cuáles serían las acciones que ellos tomarían actualmente, pero sí quiero decir que estamos en solidaridad.
Muy bien, muy bien. Entonces, conozco el sector, conozco cuánto bloquearon buques con carga chilena, lo vi en las paredes del local 13 allá en Estados Unidos, California. Así que sé que puede haber una segunda oportunidad que se llama nunca los chilenos, la clase de la pared chilena necesita la solidaridad. Como también la nosotros como ingenio hicimos una acción en el año 2016 contra el señor Maquena, aquí en Long, pidiéndole que respetara el acuerdo colectivo con los trabajadores del Estado.
Perdón, ¿fue en el 2016? ¿Contra quién?
El señor Maquena, que era administrador del puerto de Londres.
El administrador del puerto de Londres. ¿De Londres? De Long Beach, perdón. Yeah.
So I just wanted to also mention, yes, we're familiar with what the longshoremen did because I remember seeing some posters when I went to the local 13 here in the United States. But he also wanted to mention that the port workers of Iquique also did an action in 2016 against the McKenna group, which are the ones who were administrators of the ports in Long Beach in support of the Long Beach workers.
¿En solidaridad con los trabajadores de Long Beach?
Claro, solidaridad con él.
Yeah.
In solidarity with the longshoremen in Long Beach in 2016.
Qué bueno, sí. Ahora va a hablar, perdón, ¿la otra persona tiene otra pregunta?
Pregunta al compañero de... Queremos saber hasta qué punto ustedes están de acuerdo con esta nueva constitución de la que se habla y hasta qué punto ustedes están envueltos, si es que lo están en ese proceso de hacer la nueva constitución y la propia opinión que ustedes tienen de que si esta no es una táctica para atrasar el momento revolucionario del pueblo.
Sí, estaba haciendo esa pregunta de Pablo Rodríguez, dirigente sindical de AFT 2121. The question that he was asking is...
Espera, un momentito, tengo que decirlo en inglés.
The question he was asking was whether or not, to what level are you involved in the process of this new agreement of developing this new constitution, if you are involved and if you're in agreement with that, or whether or not you think that that might be more of a mechanism in which they're trying to delay or to try to stop the revolutionary process from going forward. If that is more of a delay tactic than an actual change.
Sí, ahora puede responder la pregunta.
Bueno, nosotros estamos muy de acuerdo con la consulta respecto a tener una nueva asamblea constituyente, ya que hoy día la constitución es una constitución que viene de tiempo de dictadura. Para poner un ejemplo básico, este año, en el mes de septiembre, se aprobó la reducción de horas semanales de trabajo de 40 horas. Con la constitución actual puede ser desde el Tribunal Constitucional que vete esa elegibilidad que ya se necesitó en las dos cámaras. Entonces, el pueblo ya está haciendo mejores condiciones de salud, mejores jubilaciones, tiene que modificarse la constitución para tener el control.
Un momentito, déjame terminar. Entonces, lo que usted está diciendo es que está de acuerdo con que se forme una asamblea constituyente. Un ejemplo por la cual piensa que es importante hacerlo es porque en estos momentos, por ejemplo, se está elaborando o se estaba elaborando una ley para reducir, o sea, para mantener solo el horario laboral a 40 horas en vez de tenerlo más, porque mucha gente trabaja más, ¿verdad? Y que eso podría ser hasta vetado por el Tribunal Constitucional, según la constitución que tenemos actualmente, porque es una constitución de la dictadura, y que si uno está buscando hacer cambios en las condiciones de salud y jubilación y todo ese tipo de cosas, esa parte de la Tribunal Constitucional tiene que cambiarse, porque a pesar de que se ha legislado en las dos cámaras esa ley de los 40 horas, puede aún así ser vetado por el Tribunal Constitucional. ¿Eso es lo que usted quería decir?
Correcto.
Okay.
We are in favor of the development of a constitutional assembly, constituent assembly. For example, one of the things that makes it an example of why it's needed is because the present constitution was developed under the dictatorship, which gives certain rights of veto over laws that even Congress has passed, both chambers of Congress. For example, a recent law or bill that is being passed was the 40-hour work week bill, which would keep the hours down to 40 hours. And that bill, even though it passed two sessions of Congress, two chambers of Congress, can face a veto by the Constitutional Tribunal, which is part of the dictatorship, this constitution that we have right now. So if we're trying to make changes at the health level or in our pensions or in education or other things, we're going to need we're going to need to develop our own constitution.
Bueno, y una forma de la cual estamos de acuerdo es que hoy hay una consulta ciudadana, mañana domingo, una consulta ciudadana que no es vinculante, pero que sí adelanta y va a hacer una demostración de la Asociación de Municipalidades de Chile, la cual consta de 160 municipalidades, pero adhieren a esta consulta ciudadana 140. Obviamente las que se restan son las municipalidades de derecha, quieren consultar a los ciudadanos si quieren una nueva constitución o no. Entonces mañana la mayoría de los trabajadores vamos a participar activamente, locales de mesa, llevando a nuestras familias, pero así demostrar no solamente en la calle lo que vive en los campos, sino también ser responsables políticamente y agotar las vías legislativas o que nos entregan las municipalidades para así demostrar con esta consulta que, aunque no hay vinculante, iba a ser un ejercicio democrático para poder demostrar de que queremos una nueva constitución que permita que haya mayor igualdad y mejor distribución de los recursos y mejor distribución de todos los bienes con un bienestar mejor para los ciudadanos y trabajadores.
So one of the ways that we are participating is through these municipal consultations. In fact, tomorrow there's going to be this voting at the municipal level, which is a non-binding voting. It's non-binding, but the Association of Municipal Governments, which are 160 throughout the entire country, there will be this voting that's going to be happening at the citizen level, at the municipal level. Only 140 of the 160 are actually participating, where the question is going to be posed to the citizens whether or not they want a new constitution, and whether there's 140 are participating. The ones who are not participating are right-wing ones, which they're not going to be presenting the question to their citizens regarding that. So the majority of the workers of the country will be bringing their families and will be going to these municipal entities to place their vote. And even though it's non-binding, it is still a very important action because it shows a political responsibility of being able to use all the different legislative means possible and all the different entities possible within our society to express the will of the people. And so we're going to be fighting not only for a new constitution, but we know that that is directly linked to the ability of us to be able to create a more equal society and also to distribute the resources in an equal way in terms of workers' demands and social organizations.
Oye, Nelson, ahora vamos a hablar si no es mucha la molestia, ahora vamos a, podemos cortar ahorita, pero no quiero cortarte, lo que quiero hacer es interpretar para ti lo que dice Clarence, ¿ok? Lo que va a decir Clarence ahora, ok. Okay, yeah, I was hoping to interpret, so I'm going to probably be, hold on, let me put myself, I'm going to try to interpret simultaneously for him, so don't speak so fast, okay? The time, yeah. Right, that's why. I want to do it simultaneously for him. So that's why I'm going to do it. Yo voy a tomar el teléfono para hacértelo simultáneamente por teléfono, okay? Pero primero debo conectar. Let me connect here because I'm down to 13% and put my earphone on, okay? No, I'm going to be right next to you. I'm going to do it because otherwise it's going to be very confusing for you to be hearing somebody speaking at the same time.
Okay. She's going to do simultaneously.
Yeah, hold on a second. Un segundito, voy a interpretar para ti simultáneamente, ¿ok? Un segundito. Espérame un segundo.
Yeah. Here we go. It's okay.
Sorry about that.
Here we go. Here we go.
Estamos aquí lidiando con What I will ask, if you look at me, I will be able to tell you if you're going too fast or not, okay? And that way, or too long, and make sure to make it pause. Give me some pause, okay? Because otherwise my brain is not functioning very well. Okay, ¿tú me mandaste algo a decir, Néstor? Okay. Go ahead. Okay, yeah, he just sent me the email of, via email was the coverage of the 2015 action that they did in the UK in support of the Long Beach workers. He just sent it to me right now. Yeah. Okay. All right. ¿Me puede escuchar bien? Nelson, ok, perfecto. Voy a interpretar por usted lo que dice Clarence Thomas ahorita, ¿ok?
Solidarity greetings
Le manda saludos de solidaridad
to the sisters and brothers
a las hermanas y hermanas
who are members of the Chilean dock
de
workers.
los trabajadores portuarios.
My name is Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas,
I am a third generation dock worker,
trabajador portuario de tercera generación,
retired member of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10.
local 10, trabajador de adjudicador.
This is a union that has a militant and democratic history.
Tiene una historia democrática y bien militante.
Not only does it fight
No solamente ha luchado
for workers' rights, benefits,
por los beneficios
and democracy on the job,
en el mismo trabajo,
we also have a history
tenemos una historia
of supporting issues and causes
y causas
in support of the entire working class
de los trabajadores
and the oppressed throughout the world. My local
local
is the only predominantly
es el único local que predominantemente tiene
African American
trabajadores africanos
longshore local
y el local de estibadores
on the West Coast.
de la costa del oeste.
The reason for that
Razón por la cual eso existe
is because of the historic 1934 maritime strike,
fue la huelga histórica de 1934 de trabajadores marítimos,
where members of the ILWU, who were members of the Communist Party,
miembros del Partido Comunista,
Marxist-Leninists,
marxistas-leninistas
radicals,
y radicales,
and others who supported
apoyaron
the inclusion of African Americans
de trabajadores
on the waterfront,
en puertos en las muelles,
realizing that discrimination is a tool of the bosses.
herramienta de los jefes del patrón.
I'm here today to talk about
Para conversar
neoliberalism
el neoliberalismo
on a domestic front
doméstico
as it relates to
está relacionado a
privatization
privatización
of maritime property
de la propiedad marítima,
where longshore workers work.
trabajadores y exploradores trabajan.
Waterfront property
El muelle, digamos, la propiedad de los muelles,
has a very high real estate value.
valor muy alto de bienes raíces.
One of the crises of capitalism here in the Bay Area is that a multi-billionaire by the name of John Fisher is attempting to privatize part of the third largest port on the West Coast for the purpose of building 3,000 multi-million-dollar condominiums, 400-room hotel, 1.2 million square feet of retail space, and a 34,000-seat baseball park.
34,000
Yes.
y un parque, digamos, béisbol de 34,000 pies cuadrados.
This will eliminate longshore jobs.
Ya los trabajos de estibadores,
It has the potential
potencial también de
of making the Port of Oakland
hacer que el puerto de Oakland,
a port of last resort,
el puerto de último recurso,
because shippers
los
may very well decide not to come to the Port of Oakland
shippers, los shippers pueden que deciden que no vengan, digamos, más al puerto de Oakland,
where there's a baseball park.
donde hay además, donde habría un parque de béisbol,
And condominiums,
condominios ahí, puede que decidan no venir más a ese lugar.
where once those residents move into
Una
them,
vez que los residentes se mudan ahí y se cambian a vivir allá,
they may very well raise the issue
simplemente podrían oponerse
of noise,
ruidos,
pollution,
polución,
lights,
luces,
and could very well discourage
desalentar
ships from
que
coming
vengan
to the port.
vengan barcos al puerto.
Not only
No solamente eso,
do the owners of the
dueños
Oakland Athletics,
que son de Oakland Athletics que
which wants to do this development,
que quiere hacer digamos,
they also want 150 acres
también quieren 150 acres
of public land
tierra pública
where they are currently playing baseball.
donde están jugando béisbol actualmente.
The commissioner of baseball
El comisionado del béisbol, de la Asociación de Béisbol,
has told the city of Oakland,
a la ciudad de Oakland,
if the Oakland A's don't get what they want,
tienen lo que ellos quieren. Si este equipo de béisbol no tiene lo que ellos quieren,
they possibly will leave the city of Oakland.
van de la ciudad de Oakland.
The issue of
El
privatization
tema de privatización
on waterfront property
de la propiedad marítima
is not limited to the Port of
no
Oakland.
está limitado, digamos, al puerto de Oakland.
They also
También están
want to develop stadiums
desarrollar estadios
in Portland
en Portland también,
on the Willamette River,
el río Klamath,
and they also want to build an arena
arena, digamos,
at the Port of Seattle in Washington.
centros deportivos.
The crisis of capitalism
El capitalismo
creates a
una
situation
situación
where multi-billionaires
millonarios
are now intruding
están interviniendo
into the maritime industry,
es la industria marítima,
which pays some of the best
que
wages
tiene uno de los
to
mejores
working class people
trabajadores a clase trabajadora
in the country.
del país.
The neoliberal policy
Las políticas neoliberales
of capitalists
del capitalismo
being able to pay politicians
pueden obviamente pagar a los políticos
to change
que cambien
governmental policy
políticas gubernamentales
as it relates to
relacionadas
the protection of industrial zones,
con la protección de zonas industriales,
the protection
la protección
of tidelands property,
de propiedad incluso de islands,
tidelands,
de
the waterfront,
las zonas humedales y las zonas donde están de los muelles.
the capitalists are attempting to change such zoning laws
Las leyes de zonificación,
for the sake of privatization,
la privatización,
to take away union jobs
digamos, eliminar trabajo sindical y proteger los sindicatos,
and replace them with temporary,
reemplazar esos trabajos con trabajadores temporeros,
low-wage jobs
trabajos incluso más que nada de bajos sueldos,
that do not pay living wages.
pagan, digamos, sueldos que sean suficientes para poder vivir dignamente.
John Fisher is the owner of the Oakland A's.
El dueño, además del equipo Oakland A's,
He's a multi-billionaire landowner
él es un terrateniente multimillonario,
who also owns
también es dueño de,
a large apparel
es dueño de
company
una compañía
called The Gap.
grande que se llama The Gap, que es de ropa.
He is a major player
Uno de los
for the privatization of education
protagonistas en lo que
through the charterization of public education.
a través de la creación de escuelas cartas en lo que es la educación, escuelas cartas, no sé si usted está finalizado con eso, las escuelas cartas. Nelson, sí, ya.
They are committing extortion
están cometiendo lo que se llama extorsión, están extorsionando
to the city
a la ciudad
and the residents of the city of Oakland
de Oakland
by
al
using
utilizar
the threat of
la
leaving
amenaza de salirse de la ciudad,
the baseball team leaving the city
el equipo de béisbol se vaya de la ciudad,
as a way
como una manera
of using
de
baseball
utilizar el béisbol
as a
como un
subterfuge
subterfugio
to accomplish their end.
para cumplir sus propósitos.
This is so
Es
outrageous
absolutamente horrible, o sea, insólito.
that the bosses of the ILWU,
Incluso the bosses,
yes, the employers,
o sea, que los empleadores, los que emplean a los trabajadores estibadores,
are aligning themselves
están uniendo
with the unions
con las uniones, incluso en estos
on the waterfront
muelles,
to stop
para parar
this privatization effort.
este esfuerzo de privatización. Incluso hasta los mismos empleadores de los que emplean a los trabajadores estibadores están incluso en contra de eso, se están uniendo con los estibadores para luchar en contra de esto.
This is a classic example of capitalism run amok,
Esto es un ejemplo muy clásico del capitalismo sin control,
when now the capitalists are fighting one another.
donde incluso los mismos capitalistas se están peleando entre ellos.
Longshore workers
Los trabajadores estibadores
understand capitalism
entienden muy bien el capitalismo.
probably better than any other workers
Cualquier otro
in the
país
world.
del mundo.
It is because
Debido a
we are critical to the global
la
economy.
economía global. Somos cruciales para la economía global.
The cars we drive,
Los autos que nosotros manejamos, que todos
the clothes we wear,
nosotros usamos,
the food we
la comida
eat,
que todos nosotros comemos,
the oil we use for our
que
cars,
utilizamos para nuestros autos.
anything that come off of a ship
Salga de un barco,
is unloaded
se descarga,
or loaded
cargan
by longshore workers.
trabajadores estibadores del puerto.
When we don't work,
Nosotros no trabajamos,
the global economy is shut down. As such,
Por lo tanto,
we understand
comprendemos
the importance
la
of international solidarity.
solidaridad internacional.
And it is for that
Por
reason,
esa razón,
if we are to stop the privatization
si nosotros lograremos parar la privatización
of ports,
de los puertos,
we're going to have to take international solidarity action.
tener que tomar acciones internacionales de acción internacional.
If we want to stop
Nosotros queremos parar, lograr parar
automation on the waterfront,
lo que es la automatización.
we're going to have to take international solidarity action.
Tomar acciones de solidaridad a nivel internacional.
One of the key features
Uno de los factores
of neoliberalism
neoliberalismo
is to attack labor.
atacar el movimiento sindical, el movimiento laboral.
Capitalists understand
Los capitalistas entienden
that some of the strongest unions in the
que las
world
uniones más fuertes del mundo
are dock
son
workers.
los trabajadores portuarios.
The ILW Local 10
ILWU local 10
has a long history
una larga historia
of taking international solidarity action
tomar acciones a nivel internacional de solidaridad
at the point of production.
desde el mismo punto de producción.
In 1935,
En 1935,
after Mussolini invaded
después de que Mussolini invadiera
Ethiopia,
Etiopía,
there was a community blockade
había un bloqueo comunitario
at the port
en el puerto
protesting
protestando
the loading of nickel and other
cargamentos
other
de níquel,
metal materials
materiales metalúrgicos
that were destined to go to
estaban destinados a
Italy.
Italia.
We did not load that cargo.
Nosotros no cargamos el
When Japan
Cuando Japón
invaded Manchuria,
invadió Manchuria,
there was another community picket line
otra vez otro bloqueo comunitario
protesting
protestando
the loading of scrap iron to Japan.
desechable, digamos,
We did not load that cargo.
ahí que se iba a ir destinado a Japón. Nosotros no llenamos ese cargo, nosotros no cumplimos con eso, no usamos.
In 1984,
En 1984,
ILW Local 10 refused
llegó
to handle South African cargo.
de cargar y de manejar cargamentos que venían o que iban a Sudáfrica.
For 11
Por
days
11 días.
as a strong international anti-apartheid measure.
Una medida fuerte anti-apartheid a nivel internacional.
2014,
2014,
Local 10
local 10
refused to handle cargo from the ZIM, the major Israeli shipping line,
las líneas de cargamentos israelíes principales.
for 4
4
days.
días.
To this day, ZIM does not come
Sí, no han regresado
to the West
a
Coast.
la costa del oeste.
These are examples
Son ejemplos
of international solidarity action
de acciones de solidaridad
taken by Local 10.
internacional de solidaridad que el local 10 ha asumido.
The struggle continues.
La lucha continúa.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Estamos con mucho deseo de volver a conversar con ustedes.
I understand there was a delegation from Chile of dock workers that came to Local 10 in 2014.
Es que vinieron en el 2014, una delegación de trabajadores portuarios que vinieron para acá.
Hopefully, there will be future visits in the immediate future.
I'm sorry, perdona, un segundito. What did you say?
Hopefully, there will be future visits.
Esperemos que hayan visitas futuras también. Espérate un segundito. Hold on one
Oh.
second. He wanted to say something.
Ah.
¿Quieres decir algo tú con respecto a eso, Nelson? Ya, entonces estuviste presente en los 3 últimos congresos y el último fue en Miami. ¿Fue el 2014, dijiste? ¿17? Yeah. Yeah. He was present. He was president. Nelson mentioned that he went to the last 3 conventions of the IBC, and the last one that was held in 2017, he was also there. We went to Miami. It was held in Miami.
Oh, yes, we had a delegation there.
Dice que tuvo una
And,
delegación.
and I just want to say one thing
Que sí quería decir otra cosa más.
that I need to say
Que necesito
for the record,
para, digamos, para dejar algo bien claro.
and that is,
Que
in 1973,
en 1973
there was a resolution
hubo una resolución
adopted by Local
que
10
adoptó, que el local 10 adoptó,
calling for the boycott of Chilean cargo
un boicot de cargamentos chilenos.
in the aftermath
Y después de
of the murder and coup d'etat of Salvador Allende. In 1978,
1978,
ILW Local 10
local 10
refused
se negó
to handle
manejar
bombs
bombas
that were destined to go to Chile.
en Chile.
We refused to handle that cargo.
Nos negamos a manejar ese cargamento.
A business agent by the name of
Comercial por el nombre de
Herb Mills
Mills
contacted Senator Ted Kennedy
senador Ted Kennedy,
raising the question
cuestionando
as to why
por qué
bombs were going to one of the most repressive governments in the world.
uno de los gobiernos más represores del país del mundo.
We did not work that cargo.
Ese cargamento nosotros no lo cargamos.
This is an
Es
example
un ejemplo
of international solidarity
internacional
at the point of production.
desde el mismo punto de producción, el mismo punto de la raíz.
Thank you for listening.
Muchas gracias por escuchar.
I hope
Yo espero
that my
que
few minutes
de los minutos que tengo,
of information to you has provided
me han podido proveer
some idea
una idea
of our current struggles here
de las luchas actuales aquí,
and how they are related to your struggles
relacionadas
in Chile.
con ustedes ahí en Chile.
An injury to one is an injury to all.
That was good. I learned a lot. Again.
Sister Nancy, that means a lot coming from you because you heard me talk a lot of times.
I know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Steve.
we have another speaker who's going to connect with
good.
the Mexican auto workers. I'm not sure he's available. Let me see if he's might be available.
Pero sabes que voy a conectar, no contigo, sino que para hablar contigo en un momento específico.
Thank you. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father.
Me imagino que allá, espérate un segundo.
Oh, it's pretty. I mean, thought it would be more,
Do you have the link? Did you have the streaming link?
Yes,
But did you?
we're
were
still
you able to get? Oh, we're still streaming.
we're still streaming.
Do you have the link so you can see it?
Oh yeah.
Because right now it's just we're this is
Okay.
very informal right now, right?
Yeah, very. Just a minute. Let me.
Ahora lo único que vas a ver en este momento vas a ver solamente una mesa de personas, pero espérate un segundito. Hey, Clarence, come here for 1 second. Come here. When you see streaming, is he going to be able to see it from the beginning when he connects to the link?
I'm
Can you
not.
see from the link?
Well, see, we had a break, so the one that we had before, he could see it in there. I'll give you the
Right, but we're going to send the YouTube videos, right, Steve?
Yeah, we've got the YouTube videos.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're project, okay. Tú estás conectado con Labor Video Project también, ¿verdad? ¿O no?
Yeah, could they see it? I don't know.
And we have
They could see it online. Yeah.
Video
Yeah,
Project,
online.
así que todo el video lo van a poder ver en Labor Video Project en YouTube, a través de YouTube.
so we'll get it on YouTube, get it out.
Lo van a sacar en YouTube ahorita, ¿ok?
Yeah.
Lo más pronto posible.
This man's gonna have me on the Homeland Security.
I know. He's dangerous. We are still online. We are still streaming. So what are we doing now?
Okay, well, let's,
Okay, still on.
so I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And we will continue this international struggle to link up workers around the world. And the fight to defend the Bolivian workers and the Chilean workers, the fight to defend the Chilean workers and Bolivian workers continues. So thank you, brothers and sisters, for joining us. 3 minutes.
But,
Okay, I want to introduce Brother Al Rojas, who is one of the founders of the United Farm Workers of America. And Al has been, was also with the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement in Sacramento, but he's been in a struggle to build international solidarity against the attack on immigrant workers and also in defense of the working class in Latin America and Mexico. And today, we have a situation in the United States where the AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka, is supporting NAFTA 2.0, the USMCA. Now, this is a agreement, NAFTA, which on steroids, which was opposed by the trade union movement. It was only passed with the support of Clinton and the Republicans. But now we have a situation politically where the union leadership, the AFL-CIO, Trump at least, is supporting this reactionary trade agreement, this corporate trade agreement, which has been led to the privatization of ejidos, the land in Mexico, which has led to destructive labor conditions, the maquiladoras, union busting, and a very, very terrible situation for the Mexican working class. And Alan has been fighting for solidarity with the working class in Mexico, and also is in touch with the Mexican auto workers, the GM auto workers, who were fired for having solidarity actions with the General Motors workers in the United States. Welcome, Alan Rojas.
Thank you, Steve. I want to thank all of you for participating and being here and being part of the program. I'm honored to be here. What I can say is maybe just an overview of what's happening. And, you know, obviously we all know what's happening. The whole world is exploding. And the way I look at it, I've heard it before, you probably heard it before, capitalism is in a downfall. The problem is, will the labor movement pick up their ass and do something about it? And so far, it just means, Steve, and a few of us here in this room, that probably are the ones that, you know, moving a lot of, you know, what's going on, even though there's people out in the street. But there's not yet that many people out in the street that relates to what's happening in this country. This is where everything starts from and ends up in other worlds, which is where the theft of the natural resources, as we all know, especially oil, in most of these countries, this country here, bloodthirsty, racist, homophobic, you name it, criminal, and assassin. Everything that's happening in Latin America is basically the outcome of what I believe is the indigenous populations in this part of the Western Hemisphere have been basically invaded by greed and criminality and the killing and genocide of indigenous people. And that's no different from what's happening in Mexico, across the border, and what's happening in South America, in Central America, and Caribbean nations, and also in Africa, in the Middle East. So we have capitalism is alive and well. So, while at the same time we have in Mexico our involvement many, many years ago with regards to the migration. And of course there was migration prior to that with the guest worker program now, then Bracero slave and enslavement program for the sake of, you know, there weren't enough people to harvest the food, supposedly, during World War II, so they contracted labor here. Basically, they encouraged people to come to this country to develop this state, which now is the 5th largest economy in the world. You think they give a shit about, you know, the reliance of people and human beings to harvest food? Well, at the same time, unbeknownst to many of us, in the last 3 weeks, there's been 3 impacts in regards to the food that we eat, and the contamination of E. coli, and thousands of people getting sick, and no one really hears about it. Except you hear a blurb, don't eat romaine lettuce. But there's other products that are happening. Why is this happening? Because the industry doesn't care. They don't care about consumers. Why don't they care? Because there's no uproar. There's no consumer awareness. That's why we utilize the boycott on this so-called Driscoll Strawberry boycott. Basically, there's 2 companies out of San Quintin, Baja California, which is 5.5 hours from the Mexican border. That's not different from anything that's happened in the late 60s with regards to the farm workers movement in this country. But what's happened, the politics of the Democratic Party, we've allowed them to come from the top down to be able to do what they've done well in regards to the continuation of slave and enslavement and cheap wages. Especially, Steve just talked about the first forced migration with regards to the NAFTA treaty. And who put it in there? These so-called neoliberal Democrats. And everyone up to the last guy who just left office, and now we're looking to get rid of this one, is Obama, who wanted to put in the TPP and also dealing with what now we have the so-called UMSCA, the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement. That's happening right now. But at the same time, we have all these conflicts with the people against its own government and the corruption. Washington is to blame for what's happening there, has been, always will be, unless we do something about it at this level. But what do I see as promising in the labor movement? Zilch. Nothing. As much as I want to give credit, so, okay, great, Trump goes to Mexico, meets with the new president, who has his hands full, and he's dealing with money and investment. So what does he want? He wants a trade agreement. Why does he want it? Stabilization in regards to the economy in Mexico. Well, that's a whole different matter, but at the same light, we have this whole issue of workers being really, hit hard. We organized and we founded the United Farm Workers Union. And back then, we thought one day the workers are going to take over the union, going to be led by the union, going to be elected by the union. Not so. I'm really, really upset. Probably why I've been able to live this long is it gives me the drive to say, all that work, all that sacrifice, all that blood, all those jailings, and all those beatings, and for what? When we have the union who supports the corporate establishment and the political party in this country. And where's the union movements? They're not out on the streets. It's other people who are on the streets. Maybe a few people who have joined the ranks. Other people who are saying, I'm really concerned about what's happening to me and what's happening to my community, what's happening to my grandkids. And in light of that, what are we going to do about it? Well, for some of us, it's kind of too late. But some of us, not too late because we're still here and we're doing what we can. We're still here. And that is important. But when we have this whole question of asking people to take to that whole venue, they got us on the defensive. We're just reacting. Even in my community, or the so-called immigrant community, we're saying, no, it's not about becoming gringos and getting legalized. It's about being able to live in your own effing country and be with your own family and not ever see your family ever again because you can't cross the border because they need the money. It's about struggle, it's about fighting and making sure that we have the option. There is no option for the immigrant community. I hear this, we're looking for the American dream. Okay, that sounds great because you want to escape from the tyranny of what's happened in Mexico in regards to the bloodshed. 190,000 people have been assassinated, murdered, and 29,000 people disappeared. Do you hear an alarm of the American people of that many people? They wipe out maybe 29, 30 people at a bar in Miami. They're innocent people. We got to feel for them. But does anybody feel for those people and those people that come here forcibly to say, I want the American dream. I want to be legalized. So what the hell's wrong with Yucatan, with the most beautiful cultural part of this North American continent, that you want to leave to come here? When you have a climate one day, Americans are going to have to depend on the tropical fruit that comes out of, Mexico. To eat. You can't eat oil. But to eat, it's like water. So what do we have? We have a conflict along the border with the maquila industry. Thousands of companies were making their parts now on that side of the border for trucking, for computers, and for automation products, you name it. They're not just making, assembling, leather goods with each other. No, they're doing it with highly technical stuff, paying them $6 and $7 and $8 a day, 13 hours and maybe 14 hours a day. Farm workers in 5.5 hours from the Mexican border, while people are going in their dune buggies, to destroy the earth and the soil. They don't see that. They see beautiful beaches, blue water, and plenty of beer, Coronas, and fish and lobsters, the whole goddamn thing. But do you think they'd say, what about those poor little dark people? Oh, we have those in California too. They're all over San Francisco, all over the Mission District. They're in San Jose, they're all over the damn place. But the seriousness about this is that here we go again, full circle, when we have these so-called elections, and people are saying, who are we going to elect? It's a good question. Who's left? Who's there? What are his politics and his issues that he's covering? There's only one person I know of, that you know, but the rest, a lot of talk, a lot of bullshit. Okay? But all due respect to the working people in this country, we no longer have a working class that in their union, and we thought in our union, the local 1,000 state workers union, that I worked with state for 23 years as a hearing officer for the Labor Commissioner's Office. Adjudication of labor law. After I left, 18, 20 years of organizing for the Farm Workers Union. This whole dilemma, what you see. And we see we have to fight now to gain our union and being a democratic and independent union, but we elect our own leadership. Today, most unions, and I don't have to name any unions, that's no longer the case. Everything comes from the top. Hardly anything from the bottom. I mean, rank and file. True rank and file. Even in the Farm Workers Union, we have people who are non-farm workers taking leadership in those unions, or in those leaders that are basically employees. So anyway, I'm going to just end it with this saying that what we need to do is we need to be able to understand that we can't expect too much when unions are being taken over. The last president of the United Farm Workers Union was Cesar Chavez's son-in-law. Never worked in the fields ever in his life, ever. Earning $120,000 and $130,000 and whatever he got under the table. I mean, other venues and other accounts that they had that weren't part of the union, like retirement system, the medical plan. They served on those boards and they have line items that they can charge off because they're, expensive, whatever. Non-farm worker. Before he leaves and says goodbye and he packs his bags, he goes over and says, we're going to have a board meeting and I'm going to select the new leader and farm worker leader as the president. It's going to be you, lady. He says, me? Yeah, you. Why me? And I'm being kind of facetious, but I'm trying to put some humor in this whole thing. But the bottom line is a joke. Where were the workers who decided who's going to lead them? And when did you meet with the workers? He packed his bags and took off and he got his retirement after he worked hard, but he took somebody's position as they do in any other unions, okay? And what they did is that they usurped the leadership. Where's the union today? Less than 7,000 members. Where's this woman now, who's the newly appointed with the finger saying you're now the leader of the union that was led by Cesar Chavez? And I say, do we hear anything out in the fields of California? Or you, lady, did you come out of the fields and also come out of that leadership, out of the ranches that they have in the union contract? No. I worked in the office. I was a salaried employee with the union. Really? And you're leading a union that should be led by the workers. The leadership should come from the workers. She's out now receiving awards because the nonprofit groups are wanting to have that image of the United Farm Workers Union president is going to receive our award and she's going to accept it on behalf of the farm workers. Worst of all, she says, we're going to support Kamala Harris for president. How many farm workers out there are supporting Kamala Harris for the candidacy of presidency of this country? I don't hear anybody. That's typical of what's happening with the situation with the labor unions today. And brother, Clarence, this is like a broken record, what I'm talking about. Well, that's what the workers in Mexico are saying. And guess what? In this new trade agreement, it wasn't the AFL-CIO that said, we demand that there be democracy in the trade agreement. And the workers have a right to elect their leadership or whatever. It wasn't him. It wasn't the AFL-CIO. They were making demands. But guess who was? Of all things, and I feel embarrassed to say this while I'm being filmed here, it was Trump. Trump made that a condition only because he says, how do we get these workers to stay in Mexico? Pay them a decent wage. Instead of paying them $7 and $8 an hour, a day, for 13, 14 hours, let's give them $16 a day.
An hour.
A day. A day. And Trump says, that's a great idea. That sounds great. Too late, Trump. So he goes to Mexico because he sees the law and he finds some flaws. He says, by all means, and for all the rights to go back and forth to workers here in this country and workers there, there's no enforcement. The same thing in 1994. There was never any enforcement. Bill Clinton indicated, you guys are squawking about enforcement and regulations and being able to have the corporations adhere to a decent wage, and where the products are being harvested, are they being harvested under conditions that are healthy for consumers and also for workers, instead of being sprayed with dangerous chemicals that cause cancers in the fields. Let alone forget, people eat that food. Because some people are being told by the chain stores, don't worry about it, just wash the chemicals off them.
You can't wash them.
You can't wash them. You consume them, and thereafter, God bless you. Hopefully you don't get any cancer, because it's not a funny thing. In my family, I've had several children. Children, not me. Children, and I worked in the fields. I'm saying, when does it end? So the bottom line is that what I'm talking about is that's happening right now. 2020. Workers in the fields in Mexico, workers here. The same company we're boycotting, Andrew and Williamson's, which the company probably don't hear but they sell all their products to Costco. Tomatoes, cucumbers, spinach, especially strawberries, blackberries, whatever. Forget, safely. So, those situations are real here and there. But again, what is the United Farm Workers doing? And where are they right now? I'm saying this only because people can hear me. If some of you are listening, you should find out and go to Google and try to look for the Equitable Food Initiative, which is the United Farm Workers Union and other farm worker groups supposedly. We incorporated into a corporation, nonprofit, to do business with the growers and corporate growers from this country in Mexico, and also with corporate growers in Mexico. What in the world is the United Farm Workers Union doing in Mexico when they should be in Delano, Bakersfield, Fresno, Stockton, and wherever there's any agricultural products here? They're not there. Why are they in San Quintin, Baja California? Behind the backs of the workers? They don't support the Driscoll boycott? And I'll tell you why. It's our assumption that they're working with the growers because they're in the business of the guest worker program. They've now become recruiters from workers in the fields that don't have papers. We're now going to get you legalization. So you're indebted to us, and we're saying, are they really free and independent now? Are they really free? Because when they're in San Quintin, Baja California, the growers there are working with them. And why? Because that's going to be their labor pool for the thousands and thousands of workers. Last year they had 300,000 or more guest workers working in this country. Subjugated under horrible conditions, no different from the last program. It's called the Bracero program. Nothing's changed. Just the name. Bracero, guest worker means you're a guest, you come and you go back. We don't want you here. Now they need the workers really bad. And are they talking about signing a union contract? Absolutely not. You provide the workers for us, there may be a service fee. So what are they looking for? Economics, money. How much can we make of recruiting slaves for the corporations in this country? And we'll give them a few little benefits like they're doing with that Equitable Food Initiative. Search it out on Google. They need to be exposed. But the problem is they treat our people paternalistically.
Of course, they always have.
And they will until the workers rise and say, we open up our eyes. We want our own union that we could do it. That's what they're doing with these workers at General Motors. The minute they tied to the strike in Chicago and some of these Tennessee, and assembly plants. They built, you know, some unity. But that's not what the General Motors wanted. That's why they started firing them. And they're blacklisting them, all of them. I hate to use that word, blacklisting, but they're telling them, you can't get a job anymore. Same thing with farm workers. They did the same thing. That's an old method. So what are we saying? We're saying we have a serious problem with regards to the rank and file and the young people in this country. And I think the only way it's going to happen is education and orientation, and also pushing the button with workers and saying nothing's going to change.
Organization. Yeah.
So the bottom line is what I'm saying is to you is that support the boycott, Driscoll boycott, pass the word on to other people, and we should be passing it on to more and more unions, because even our chief labor representatives don't believe in boycotts. And to me, that's the only true weapon next to the strike. But you don't last long in a strike after 40 days like the auto workers. They're into trouble with regards to how to survive, because the pressures at home with surviving food and paying the bills and the rent. So the boycott is one tool that needs to be, you know, it's the most powerful. We won the boycott, the great boycott, in 3 years. We didn't have Facebook, we didn't have internet, we didn't even have a phone, let alone a cell phone.
And I was in Florida not eating grapes or lettuce.
So anyway, I'm going to stop right there and just say this, the maquila workers in the border and the farm workers here and the farm workers in San Quintin, nothing's changed, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you so much.
And also, we want to support the fired GM workers in Sinaloa, the General Motors, Mexico General Motors workers, because they have been basically victimized because of their solidarity action with the GM workers in the United States.
Quick for brother, hey, I can't tell you how pleased I am that to see you here again. I saw you the first time when I came to this country in the late 80s, and you were my inspiration. Right now, I think you mentioned something that is calling my attention that I didn't know about these 200,000 or more guest workers right now. I wonder, are they all from Mexico or from all over the world?
Mostly Mexico.
Because I don't know if you heard that El Salvador and Guatemala are being pushed by the U.S., and I think they signed already something to bring guest workers to Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico.
Oh yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, they're expanding the program because there's more and more people have shifted to other jobs. In other words, higher paying jobs. So that leaves a vacuum. So they have to fill that vacuum. And by doing that, it just, opening up the market more for people to so-called legitimize their being able to come into this country. But they're not free. They're not free to move around. They're kept with one employer, and if they don't have enough work, they end up in camps, or they get sick, and they have to, ship them back to Mexico. And a lot of times they're mistreated. They don't get the care and health care, and they get sick. That's been the biggest problem in regards to workers that, have been contracted to this country through the Mexican government, U.S. government, and also the corporations or the companies here. And in Mexico, you have, like they have here, company unions who take control of the workforce, even much more so. In regards to pesticides and chemical spraying and sexual abuse and the right to fire you at any time they want. They can talk a lot of things about how we have protection for workers and the Mexican government, even the president of Mexico. But the bottom line is that it's about enforcement. And right now, what it looks like is that the Mexicans are saying, we don't want anybody coming and telling us what to do in our country. But they're avoiding the whole thing about the labor unions, and the labor unions coming in to put pressure on the government. And they don't want any work stoppages, any strikes. They want everything to go nice and let the flow of goods come through. But at the same time, I think Richard Trumka did mention we need to put enforcement, have mechanisms of application and enforcement in relation to products. If the corporation's not abiding by the labor laws and they're not respecting that, then there's only one way: stop the product from coming in until they resolve and deal with this whole problem of grievances, whatever, with the workers.
Right. So, if you might, I would like to clarify, if you can. Governments on this program are not involved, isn't it? Just via corporations.
Repeat that again.
Governments, it's just the corporations. This is a corporate trade agreement. I mean, in other words, this is not a workers' trade agreement. This is a corporate trade agreement,
Right.
which will allow U.S. corporations to continue to go into Mexico and control the Mexican workforce. The recolonization of Mexico through their buying up the trains, buying up the oil, buying up the ports. This will continue, and the unions, U.S. unions that are supporting that, have accepted it. This is why the Democrats say they're against Trump, but they're supporting an agreement with Trump. USMCA. If you're against Trump, are they saying? Are the unions are saying now that are supporting this agreement? They're in line with Trump in Mexico.
So maybe I didn't. I wasn't clear enough. I'm talking about like in El Salvador, right? They just signed an agreement of about 10 to 20,000 workers. So the U.S. government is not involved with that. It's just corporations, or is the United States government involved with that?
The U.S. issues a visa to those workers.
Yeah, I'm talking about working conditions.
Well, working conditions apparently is the authority of the state government and also federal government. But the bottom line it comes down to is enforcement. Who's going to enforce those laws and regulations? If you don't have mechanisms that deals with protecting those workers, it doesn't happen.
But the other thing is Richard Trumka, the AFL-CIO, the UAW, have not said one word about the fired workers in Mexico. Right. Rockwell Automation, where the workers were fired there. Workers were fired about the Moros rebellion. Workers were fired at General Motors. Not one word is said, rehire these workers. Now, how can you talk about defending the working class in Mexico and equality when you don't even mention the fact that they fired the workers illegally and they're still without work? I mean, if you can't defend the workers who've been fired, how are you going to defend the workers that are left there? You'll continue to have company unions. So what we have to do is build a movement in solidarity with the fired workers in Mexico. We have to say that the GM workers, these other fired workers at Tecate, have to be defended. That is real solidarity. I don't believe that the government of the United States, which doesn't even stop workers from being fired here, for forming unions.
See, the government
16,000 workers are fired every year. Who form unions? We're going to help the Mexicans defend labor rights. We can't even defend the labor rights of American workers? Right. What the hell is that?
Well, what you have here with regards to this whole question of the old system in Mexico, at least, the predominant that they had structured in the political party and the government in Mexico before the new government came in, is there was a tie-in with the company unions they called charro unions. And those charro unions were corrupt, and part of the corruption also with the corporations, Mexican corporations and U.S. corporations. The Driscoll's Corporation and all these other corporations that I mentioned and others that are there in Mexico, they play that game where they are part and complicit of that corruption, where they sign protection contracts, which basically are now illegal. In other words, they protect the employer, they don't protect the workers, and that's why these workers at GM, General Motors, and many others, farm workers and also workers who are trying to organize right now. Right now, they're being beat up. They're using violence, intimidation, and threats. And the government says, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and protect your workers. But that's not the case. The bottom line is that there's no enforcement. So here you have the labor secretary, the Mexican labor secretary, who is the only means to be able to enforce the law. They have no mechanisms, no regulations, no laws that enforce them with that authority. I mean, I was a labor commissioner. We have laws here in California that relates to how much enforcement. But at least you have some laws. But unless a worker comes in and files a complaint, unless you go out to the fields, and what they did, the state did, and I'll say it here publicly, they do once a year, just before Christmas. Let's go do a roundup and go get 2,000 citations, and we did our job for the rest of the year. The rest of the time, they can go to the office and file a complaint individually. But when we went out to the fields, it was kind of, like a class action suit. You're talking about thousands of workers being filed actions against by the Labor Commissioner's Office or the Workforce Agency for the state. The state right now is culpable of non-enforcement as it relates to, as much as they want to argue, even with me, and saying, no, the fact is you do not enforce the law. The people come to see you if they find out about you. You really think a Spanish-speaking person's gonna walk in and have no papers and file a complaint in regards to the employer? Right. That violated, there's a section in the labor code that says it's illegal for an employer to demand and force a worker to work in an environment that is against their health and welfare, and they may get injured. It's a crime. And do you think that they go out and do that only after the person's dead or in the hospital and their arm's gone? Maybe. But sometimes, the employer is corrupt and covers it up with, we'll pay you under the table, don't file a workman's complaint. Because it's a crime. But this whole question about workers in this country, forget about, the border in Mexico. Even right now, in that new law that they passed, which looks like a great law, they're going to allow, inspectors from this country and inspectors from that country come together and go and inspect, where there's violations that happen and people denounced it and filed complaints. Well, now they allowed, which there was a congressman from Mexico, federal congressman, that told us straight out, I'm opposed to the what do you call it, outsourcing. Outsourcing is a new game in town, where basically they reclassify you and they downgrade you to certain wage levels, and now they make you a second class. I'll give you an example. At the Volkswagen plant in Mexico, Central Mexico, you have 34,000 members. Only 8,000 members are considered rank and file, the rest are not. What's so different of one human being to another if they're working, doing the same classification, but they decided to now change it? We're going to downgrade your classification, so now you don't get any benefits until you wait 5, 10, 15 years, whatever.
On this NAFTA 2.0, what are the big gains for AFL-CIO?
I would say null and void. I don't really believe there's been any real gains. It's
because
like
how Trump will do something like that right now when it's not even a year from elections, so he's gonna lose that whole.
This is the relationship with the Democratic Party. That's what this is about. Pelosi and the Democrats. The AFL-CIO leadership, the union leadership, support the Democratic Party.
They always have.
And that's what this is about. The Democratic Party is supporting this trade agreement. In fact, not one Democrat who's running for president, including Bernie Sanders, has said they're opposed to this agreement right now. I mean, you would think that the Democrats would say, who are running, would say, I'm against this NAFTA 2.0. I'm against USMCA. Silence. The IEM, the machinist union, has said they're opposed to this agreement.
Yeah.
And my union, the CWA, have said they're going to read the agreement. But Trump actually agreed to support this USMCA without even having a vote of the executive committee. He did it unilaterally.
Under what basis is Trump saying, are they getting, is it salary increase, working conditions, labor?
There is no real, in my view, there is no real benefit for U.S. workers. In fact, the Washington Post said it's basically 90% of NAFTA. There's really no changes. This is the Washington Post. They said it's 90% like NAFTA. It's NAFTA 2.0. That's what they're saying. That's what the capitalist media is saying. NAFTA 2.0. So if it's NAFTA 2.0, why would Trump and the AFL-CIO leadership support NAFTA 2.0?
They came right out and did it, right?
I mean, it shows you the nature, the class nature of the AFL-CIO. That this union bureaucracy supports capitalism. They support a capitalist reactionary trade agreement. It's a corporate trade agreement. There's nothing in this agreement, trade agreement, about the rights of Mexican workers, about ending the attack on immigrants. You know, the European Union, I don't agree with the European Union, EC, but they have rights for workers in that agreement. They have a trade agreement, and they also have rights for workers to travel. Well, they don't have, so we're making a trade agreement with Mexico and Canada where the Mexican workers get no equality, no benefits. The right of capital to move back and forth, but no rights of workers to move. What kind of agreement is that? But the unions don't even raise the issue of, in a trade agreement, the rights of workers, the democratic rights of workers. They've accepted the terrorism and the imprisonment of immigrants in prisons and children. They've accepted that. That's off the table in discussion about NAFTA. So they're talking about a trade agreement, and they don't even mention, what about the rights of these human beings? What about the rights of children and workers? That's off the table.
There's 7,000 contracts, mostly from the company union and protection contracts. They're supposed to be voided. Are they going to void them? How is it going to happen? Maybe years. In the meantime, what should have happened is it should have voided those contracts immediately and allow the workers to go into sessions to negotiate those, or even have the right to affiliate to found their own unions and then negotiate contracts. Have they done that, they say, from this point on, once we pass the law, every union that's a union today can be challenged by other workers,
So you mean the 7,000 across the nation, or where? 7,000?
Nationally.
Where?
Nationally in Mexico.
National?
7,000 contracts.
What this is going to lead to is a rebellion in Mexico. Because a lot of the Mexican workers, the Mexican people believe that AMLO Obrador would actually solve their problems. And they believed him, they voted for him. In reality, the economic conditions of capitalism in Mexico, controlled by the United States, are going to remain. And that is not changing. So the economic conditions of the Mexican working class are not going to improve because of this trade agreement. In fact, they're encoding this structural relationship for continued exploitation of the Mexican working class, the Mexican people. And that is going to lead to an explosion. The fact that the U.S. unions, the UAW, are silent about the firing of the GM workers, talk about unity. If the unions in this country don't want to be undermined by outsourcing, why don't they fight for strong unions in Mexico? Why don't they demand the rehiring of the Mexican fired GM workers? Why don't they fight for the rehiring of the Rockwell automation workers? Not a word. So it's going to be up to the rank and file in the United States, auto workers here, and workers in Mexico to unite. That is the only solution that's going to defend workers on both sides of the barrier.
In the U.S. that all is saying practically that it's nowhere to be found, is it? Rank and file as you know it.
Well, there is. In the UAW, there is opposition. There was opposition to the sellouts.
of this latest contract that allowed for continued permanent two-tier wages in the auto plants. But there's a bureaucracy, an albatross is on top of the working class. That albatross is linked up with the Democrats and with the government, and they're not interested in a workers' democratic movement in this country. That's very clear. They're afraid of workers' democracy. They're afraid of debate. They're afraid of information. Has there been a debate? I mean, if Trump will not even have a vote on the AFL-CIO Executive Committee, and this is the top of the AFL-CIO, if he will not even allow a vote on USMCA, you think you're going to have a vote of the rank and file? Do you support this or are you opposed to it? I mean, they don't want democracy. I mean, that is a issue. The issue of democracy and workers' control, workers' membership is critical. If we don't have democracy in our labor movement, we're not in a position to fight bureaucracy and to fight the employers and the capitalists.
There's no independent movement, labor movement in this country.
None.
None. And the reason for that is exactly what he just said. The Democratic Party and the union higher-ups need each other because the unions are the fat cow. They provide the money and the numbers of people out in the street in order to get the vote out. When it should be the other way around. So you're the Democratic Party, we're the Labor Party. We select our own leadership and we're our own candidates. We don't allow the Democratic Party to come and tell us, the labor movement and the Labor Party, the independent Labor Party, what candidates we support or not. If you want to negotiate, then we need so many people here, these positions here, and you support them too, even though we're not together, but we'll work with one another.
That's why I was asking you earlier that what is the hook then? Because if you say that there is no independent union movement anymore, then what?
No, I meant there's no independent union or labor party that's organized. Okay.
There is growing anger and frustration. I mean, one of the things about this rebellion, I mean, the world is on fire. The rebellions all over the world.
All over.
In Algeria, in France, and next Saturday we're going to have a rally to support French workers and the Algerian workers. So the United States is not immune. What the unions are saying, the union bureaucracy is saying, we should mobilize to get the Trump out. We should wait for the Democrats to impeach him. This is what they're saying. Impeachment will solve the problem. Well, number one, it's a system problem. Removing Trump doesn't resolve the system problem. But number two is, are we going to rely on the Democrats to solve this problem? In France, I mean, you want to look at this election. The difference between what the British were doing, Social Democrats, in France. In Britain, the union bureaucracy has said, we'll have to rely on the election to get rid of Boris Johnson.
What they just did
in France, in France, the workers are saying we're going to go out in a general strike to bring down the government.
They're doing that now.
Okay, they're doing that right now, right today.
Yeah.
It's not by having an election to get the government out. It's by a general strike. A general strike is the way that you can defeat the capitalist class.
Right.
That's what we have to fight for. Economics. That's what we have to fight for in this country. We have to fight for a general strike against Trump.
And it's got to be worldwide.
Well, it is. There are general strikes happening all over the world. In Colombia, it's happening all over the world. But in this country,
who's going to call it in the U.S.?
Well, we have to fight for it. We have to popularize it. We have to make it an issue where people think about it. Is the idea of waiting for these rotten Democrats, corrupt Democrats, to get rid of Trump? Is that a useful strategy? Is that going to help us in the future? We're going to rely on these Democrats, Dianne Feinstein and company, to defend us. You're hoping for an illusion, which is what it is. So I think I want to thank you all for coming here and thank you all for participating. Thank you.
Thanks for
You want to stay overnight?
No.
Very good.
Okay, good.
I'll just drive back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
All right.
How do I get back onto the freeway? Just take, what is it that,
Yeah, you go across, you go down Second Street, and then make a right on Bryant.
We have to go harder and get it.
What street is this?
Show them on,
Well,
go
social
to
media.
Second Street, here, I'll show you.
Okay, no, I know where's that, Second Street.
Yeah, your Second Street is over there, so wait till the light turns red.
And then go all the way to Bryant?
Wait, right turn